All right. Right. What's up? Let's just wait for it to load for me here. I think YouTube is waking up quick. Rockfin, where you at? Twitter, you're up. Okay. Twitter's always first. There's Rockfin. Okay, we got some Rockfin. Do we got some YouTube? Ooh, still waiting on the YouTube. And YouTube's up. All right. Okay, guys. You know me, I gotta wait for it. And we'll wait a little bit here, let people trickle in because we are technically a minute early. We are 1 minute early. By the way, I'll make a quick announcement here before we officially get started. For everybody who watches this show on YouTube, please, if you don't mind, every now and again, I mean, you can do it today, even make sure you're still subscribed to this channel. I've been looking a little more closely at the analytics, and either the exact same amount of people uh like to unsubscribe after each stream or people are being unsubscribed. One of the two. Either every single time I stream, the exact same amount of people decide, hey, I don't like this show anymore, or a certain amount of people decide they do like it and they subscribe, and then exactly that every single time I stream, exactly 5 subscribers go away. Exactly 5. Like, I kind of looked at it and it was like, there's no way. How is this? So, what I'm saying is, I'm pretty certain it's fair to say they're unsubscribing people. Now, I know people come and go from shows. I've tweaked the format of this show some as of recent. So, some people are going to unsubscribe, other people are going to subscribe. But I find it hard to believe that exactly 5 subscribers every single time. Uh, my point is, make sure if you want to be subscribed to this channel, just make sure you're still subscribed. All right, announcement over. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, the headline show for the week. We are on a different day. Typically, we do the headline show on Thursday because that gives more news a chance to happen. You know, I mean, we're kind of summarizing the week. So Thursday is a pretty solid day to do it. But every now and again, my schedule may require a different day to be our headline show. That's the case this week. What's going on, Ron? Are you on the road this week? I am not, but Thursday is my wife's birthday. Yeah. And so, we're doing the show today. There is a lot to talk about regardless. And the good thing about the show today is that there is a little bit of good news that I have to share. A little bit of got even a victory, and then I got kind of just a fun story. But the lead story today is anything but fun or happy or decent. It's very, very heavy. So we're definitely going to start out in a very heavy place. These days, it's hard not to start out in a heavy place. I mean, if you're talking about what's going on in the world, I mean, the world is in a rough place right now. I mean, someone said to me the other day, they're like, yeah, I just turned on the news and it was just so depressing. Right. It was just like, well, I think that's warranted. I mean, look at the world around you. Things aren't great right now. So, yeah, chances are most news you're watching, especially if it's actually news, is not going to be uplifting. I think it was John Krasinski from The Office. He tried to make a show that was just good news. It was like just good news. And it was at a time where like the world was crumbling and we were on lockdown. And so I'm pretty sure he abandoned the concept. I don't think it's still around. And it's like, yeah, man, because that's just not warranted right now. Like it's a heavy world right now. That's just the reality of it. So anyone who is going to be honest about that truth, yeah, it's not going to be like super happy fun time too often. And anyway, that's the case for our leading headline today because we're talking about Julian Assange. And let's just get right into it. This is a summary by Kevin Gostola. Kevin, who I got to have on the show at some point. I've been wanting to actually have Kevin on for over a year now, and I always talk about it, and I never reach out to him. I don't know why I do that. I got to reach out to the guy. But Kevin is one of a handful, and I don't want to, not credit other people because there's a lot of journalists who are doing amazing things, but he is among the journalists who are really covering the Assange beat very, very well. And the work that they do is infinitely important because if it wasn't for these independent journalists who are boots on the ground in London and in other parts of the world regarding Assange, we'd be completely lost. We'd be completely lost because the corporate media either doesn't talk about it at all or they, misreport on it. They just spread misinformation and propaganda around it. But here's an update on Julian Assange, and it's not a good one. This is from The Dissenter. UK Supreme Court slams door on Assange appeal. Extradition may be authorized. So we're going to go into the details, but a quick summary to get everyone up to date. Julian Assange, it was ruled in 2021 that he could not be extradited to the United States, which was a relief. It wasn't a huge relief because it's not like justice was served in this case. Basically, what the ruling was the judge said, hey, the United States, that's too brutal. Now, Belmarsh Prison, where Julian Assange is at, is brutal in and of itself. And keep in mind, he's being held on completely bogus charges. He should be free and at home with his family. But nonetheless, even they said, hey, we can't send him to the United States. That's too freaking brutal. And basically, the United States just said, come on, you could send him. We'll be nice. We swear. And the UK said, okay. And so Assange's defense team said, yeah, I don't think that tracks. We're going to appeal this. And recently, the Supreme Court, who they appealed to, said, we're not going to hear it. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. Without any explanation, the British Supreme Court denied WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange permission to appeal a decision by the British High Court. The Supreme Court maintained that the appeal did not raise an arguable point of law and sent the case back to the Westminster Magistrates Court. And that's the district court which initially blocked the United States government's extradition request. By refusing to grant Assange a hearing, the U.S. government effectively won their appeal. Whether Julian is extradited or not, which is the same as saying whether he lives or dies, is decided through a process of legal avoidance. Because, yeah, the Supreme Court said we're not going to, hear this. This is a quote from his fiance, which we're going to get more on that later, by the way. We're going to go more there later. But first, let's get the nuts and bolts of this. Avoiding to hear arguments that challenge the UK court's deference to unenforceable and caveated claims regarding his treatment made by the United States, the country that plotted to murder him, declared Stella Morris, his partner. Morris continued, Julian is the key witness, the principal indictor, and the cause of enormous embarrassment to successive U.S. governments. He brought the country's atrocity into the public domain. Yes, he did. The Westminster Magistrates Courts may now refer to the extradition to the British Home Office for Home Secretary Priti Patel to review. According to Bimber Pierce, the law firm representing Assange, and I'm probably mispronouncing that name, they are entitled to make submissions to the Home Secretary for consideration before the extradition request is approved. If Patel approves the extradition, Assange's defense may submit an appeal on the issues of freedom of the press that were not addressed before the High Court yet. That would likely prevent Assange from extradition. Okay, so they're sending it to another court for pending approval. And if that gets approved, then they still have the play to appeal it on the case of freedom of the press. And then it goes on to say, however, if the High Court and Supreme Court refuse to hear the appeal because they did not believe it raised arguable points of law, he could potentially be transferred to the U.S. before the year is over. And, geesh, I certainly hope not. So let's cover a couple bases here. And, those of you who watch this show all the time, you know that we have talked about the Assange case a lot, and you know that we've gone through the summary a lot. And I'm going to keep doing that. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop until the general populace realizes how freaking bogus this whole thing is and how in any just society, this man would be freed immediately. Because too many people don't. And you look at this court case, and you look at what he's being charged under the Espionage Act, which is an act that goes back to 1917. It was written in the context of the World War. It has no bearing on today's society. It's only used now to prosecute whistleblowers and the people who publish them. So it's a completely bogus law in and of itself that has no bearing on today's society. They're claiming that he did things that there's no evidence that he did, because just publishing information, that's not a crime. And some of the stuff that they're angry at him for publishing, I mean, some of it was also published by The Guardian. So what are you going to do? So what they're trying to claim is that he helped hack something. He helped Chelsea Manning hack something. Now, they've been torturing Chelsea Manning for over 6 years to try to get a false confession out of her. She hasn't given that confession. I don't know about you, but if I was tortured for 6 years and something was true, I'm pretty sure I'd spill the beans. Would you? I'm pretty sure I would. So I think it's safe to say Chelsea Manning is telling the truth, and Julian Assange didn't help her hack anything. That's what they're hoping for. They're hoping that, oh, he hacked something. Now, their big testimony against Julian Assange lies with a dude from Iceland who was embezzling money from WikiLeaks. He embezzled over, I think, 50 grand from WikiLeaks. He was spying on Assange on behalf of the FBI since 2014. And he was doing that because he had been convicted on several counts of fraud, financial fraud. Oh, and he's a convicted pedophile. So he's a sex offender. He is stealing money, was stealing from WikiLeaks, was reporting on Julian Assange to the FBI. He's their star witness. Oh, and by the way, he admitted that everything he said was a lie. Everything he said was a lie. Also, the United States, yes, did in fact have a plan to murder Assange. The Trump administration was actually behind it. You know, Julian Assange, he's so buddy-buddy with Trump that Trump plotted to kill him. That's how buddy-buddy they are. And you know who revealed all that? Yahoo News. So that's what's going on in this case. The U.S. basically, oh, they're plotting to kill him. And then the U.S. tells the U.K. courts, oh, no, we're not going to do that. He's going to get a fair shake. How can he even get a fair shake when the charges are so freaking bogus to begin with? Answer me that. So it is so insanely absurd that it's gotten to this point. And now it's beyond absurd that they're not even respecting the ruling that he can't be extradited. Richard Medhurst, who's another journalist who's been on the Assange beat pretty well, too. I like the way he summarizes it here. Let's take a look at his tweet. Sorry. It's taken. Okay, there it goes. In refusing to hear Assange's case today, this was yesterday, he tweeted this. The UK Supreme Court is basically saying that it's okay for a requesting state, the United States, to lose an extradition battle, which they did, then provide worthless assurances afterwards and extradite a journalist anyway. And then he puts it, quote, democracy. That's a great summary. That's a really good summary. And that's not even an embellishment. That summary Richard Medhurst just tweeted. That's literally what happened. They ruled, yeah, you can't extradite him to the United States. That's a court ruling. The United States said, come on, we'll be nice. And the court said, okay, cool. And then his defense said, this doesn't seem right. We're going to appeal this. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, there's nothing to see here. Democracy, quote unquote, as Richard Medhurst said in his tweet. And they quoted Kevin Gastola quoted his fiance, Stella Morris. So let's add something else here. Now, as far as their next plays, it looks like, they're sending this to another court. They can appeal that decision on the grounds of free press. I also heard some grumblings that they can appeal to the European Human Rights Court. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. I'm not a legal expert at all, and I'm certainly not a legal expert, in countries that I don't abide in. Like, I was actually on a show earlier today with my buddy Tom, and we were talking about that. And Tom brought up, he's like, well, would there be some complexities with the European court because, the UK is not part of the EU? And that's a valid question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what complexities may or may not exist. I don't know if the EU could just simply say, well, we just want to stay out of it. I don't have those answers. And I think at this present moment, nobody really has those answers. I mean, there's people who can speak to the legalities a lot better than I can. But what I can speak to is just the humanity of all this and the complete absurdity of all this. And what I want to mention when we're bringing up his fiancée, Stella Morris, is the date, March 23rd. On March 23rd, Julian Assange is supposed to get married. He's going to get married in prison, which sucks, but he's still getting married. So they decided that approximately a week before his wedding, they're going to drop news on him that could mean the end of his life. This is psychological torture. There's no sugarcoating it. This is psychological torture. I mean, they've literally tortured the guy too. But this is psychological torture. Can you imagine that? If you are married, I'm married. It was one of the happiest days of my freaking life. I mean, my wedding day, and a lot of people, they have the same, when they recount their wedding day, it's just a big fun blur. Like I can't recall that many. I mean, obviously, the I do moment and stuff like that, our first dance, like I can recall that very vividly. But most of the wedding itself, I can't recall specific moments because it was just such a fun freaking blur. But I recall the feelings of joy that I had, just the overwhelming feeling of joy. And the anticipation leading up to that overwhelming joy. I mean, it's such a special thing. It's an amazing thing. Imagine being in that moment and about to have that day. And yeah, it's going to be a less than ideal day because you're in prison. But still, nonetheless, this gives you something to fight for big time. And about a week before that, they dropped this information that could mean you're going to lose your life. If he gets sent to the United States, there's a good chance they're just going to kill him. There's a good chance we're never going to know what's going to happen. There's going to be no transparency whatsoever. And they'll just try to get him to die in prison. That's likely what will happen. I mean, just imagine that. I mean, like how? Ugh. That's so freaking evil to do to somebody. And don't try to, oh, it's just a coincidence. Yeah, they happen to rule right now. It was announced about a week ago he was going to have a wedding on March 23rd. And then a week before that, they're like, hey, guess what? We have some news. The Supreme Court has reached a decision. And living through this and seeing just how bogus this court case is. And then so many people that have just been fed the corporate propaganda around Assange that just passively accept this. They're just like, well, he probably committed a crime and he should just go to the United States and just face the music. Like, you think he'll get a fair shake in the United States? Do you know the charges actually against him and how ridiculous they are? Do you know how he's been treated in the court so far? How he hasn't been given access to his attorneys? Do you know how, like, they've messed with his food in prison? They put metal balls in his freaking food. They kept him in solitary confinement. The conditions are terrible. They're literally trying to kill this guy. It's happening in real time. We're living through this. And, I was thinking about this earlier this morning. I have lived through cases sort of like this throughout my lifetime where there has been a somewhat happy ending. I think of, for instance, the West Memphis Three. I don't want to get too. I don't want to go off on that for too long, but just to kind of bridge the analogy here, the West Memphis Three. It happened in West Memphis, I believe, in Arkansas. Yeah, Arkansas was the state there, and these children were murdered. Very tragic. And they had no idea who did it, and this happened in the early '90s, I believe. And they basically targeted the three kids in the community who listened to heavy metal music. The three kids who were kind of different and wore Black Sabbath t-shirts. They said, oh, it was a satanic thing, and they killed these kids. And then what they did was they took one of the three kids, and one of the three kids accused of the murder, who they were barely teenagers, if that. I don't remember their exact ages, but one of them was developmentally disabled. And they took that kid, he was a kid, and they forced a false confession out of him. They kept him, they confined him for hours. He had no parents with him, which I believe isn't even legal. He had no attorney with him. And again, he is developmentally disabled. And they, these prosecutors just manipulated him. They just mentally manipulated him to a false confession. And they used that confession to convict the three of them. There was no evidence, none whatsoever. And those three people lost, I think, almost 20 years of their lives. It wasn't until, I believe, the mid-2000s that they were all released from prison. And what happened was more evidence came to the surface that They exonerated them. That it became clear they didn't do it. And one of the victims' parents even came out and said, "Look, these three gentlemen did not murder my child. They didn't. I thought they did, and I was angry. We were all angry. We all wanted justice, but these three men were falsely imprisoned, and they should be released. This is not justice." And the West Memphis Three are now free. I actually saw one of them speak at a riot fest in Chicago, and there was an entire movement that happened around this whole thing. Eddie Vedder was a big part of it. Henry Rollins was a big part of it. I know some of you may already be familiar with the West Memphis Three, but if you're not, that's a very, very brief summary of it all. Um, this kind of reminds me of that a little bit, but man, it took almost 20 years for them to gain their freedom. I mean, what Julian Assange is going to be close to 70 by then. If it takes almost 20 years, I mean, he'll be close to 70. So, boy, and again, I'm not saying that the West Memphis Three was some happy-go-lucky ending. It really wasn't. These people lost prime years of their lives. Is it good that they're free now? Abso-freaking-lutely. And I think one of them is a teacher now. I think one of them is is kind of doing some music and they're speaking a lot and stuff like that. But they lost the prime years of their lives. I mean, they spent their teenage years. I think the oldest one was like 15. They spent their prime years in prison. I mean, imagine spending about the age of 15 through 30 something, because there was a loophole that they were tried as adults. That's another thing. They were tried as adults, even though they weren't. So, I in some ways find a little bit of solace that, okay, well, I've lived through situations before where justice was finally served. To an extent where at least people gain their freedom. But it's like, geez, we don't have that kind of time with Julian Assange. Julian Assange isn't a teenager. He's 50 years old. And it's hard not to feel helpless in this thing. Like, it's hard not to just feel like, well, I mean, so much of this is just like, well, we're waiting to see what they're going to do next. I don't know what is at their disposal. I don't know how. I mean, at least he's not on a plane to the United States right now. At least that's not happening. But shit, what's going to happen next? We're all kind of left to wait. And you just look at how absurd this whole thing is. And I was on a show earlier today with my friend Tom. My friend Tom he runs a network called FYI Nation. And Tom is a good friend. We've been friends for many years. But Tom is a little more, I guess, center left compared to me. And those are his words, too, not mine. And Tom is someone who I flipped on Julian Assange. Tom used to be one of those people who was like, Julian Assange, no, I think he did something and he should come to the U.S. and face the music. And Tom had me on his show to discuss it once. And at the end of the discussion, Tom changed. And he said, you know what? You're right. And he looked into it a little more, too, on his own after our discussion. And he said, yeah, I got this wrong. I was wrong. Julian Assange should be freed immediately. And I'm not bringing this up to like pat myself on the back, but I am bringing this up to say, that is something we can all do. Even if it's just as small as someone in your personal life who maybe they're not like, maybe it's not like they're bad people, like they're like, Assange. Maybe they just haven't really heard the full story. They don't really know the full story of things. Just being out there to tell it, being out there to just change someone's mind on this and just get public opinion on our side as best as we can. I mean, that's one of the few things you really do have the power to do. So I'm going to keep doing it to the best of my ability. And again, I mean, thank you so much for the journalists who are really on the front lines covering this beat. The Gordon Dimmicks, the Richard Medhurst, Taylor Hudak, Caitlin Johnstone covers Assange a lot, Kevin Gostola, and all the people. I know I can't think of everybody. It's too much, but everybody who has made their trips to London and has stayed on this beat and refuses to let it die, um, it's infinitely important. And, when you look at it bigger picture, there's a certain very cruel irony that this is a story of a true assault on press freedom. And if it wasn't for an independent press that struggles to survive, we would be completely in the dark on this. Completely. So, free Assange now. And got a story here. We're going to switch gears now, and we're going to go out to my old hometown, actually, or near my hometown out in Western Pennsylvania, which, by the way, I can't wait to see you on tour. And this has to do with nurses who are striking out there. So let's check this out. This is from the Post-Gazette, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Armstrong County Memorial Hospital nurses are striking for better pay, staffing, and retention. Over 200 nurses at Armstrong County Memorial Hospital are demanding a new contract to guarantee improved pay, staffing, and retention, and they walked off the job. The nurses at the containing hospital walked out at 7 a.m., marking the first strike at the 160-bed hospital in more than 20 years. The nurses' 3-year contract with the hospital expired in July. Cassie Wood and Jerry Dunn, the respective president and vice president of ACMH Nurses United, the union that represents the nurses, expressed sadness. We're a bit sad because we want to be in the hospital and take care of our community. But the hospital's 220 nurses, who overwhelmingly rejected management's most recent contract offer, felt that a strike was the best step. The hospital has been dragging their feet. No new negotiation sessions took place. So people are leaving this hospital for better paying jobs because they're not paying the nurses what they should. More than 40 ACMH nurses have less than the past year, sometimes taking jobs elsewhere that pay $6 more per hour. So they're underpaying these nurses. And if you know anybody who is a nurse, you know that they damn well should not be underpaid. Nurses work incredibly hard. They are heroes. They work long shifts. They don't always get to take their breaks because, hey, when there's an emergency at the hospital, you got to be there. They show up. They clock in and they work. And sometimes they're working for 12 hours at a time. And they've been working really, really hard the past 2 years. In these pandemic times, they are working very, very hard. And here you have a hospital that doesn't want to pay them what they deserve, that doesn't want to give them what they deserve as workers. And it's to the point where they had to go on strike. Now, some of the emergency services are still operating, so the hospital is still going. But these nurses had to go on strike. So they're standing out in the cold in single-digit temperatures, demanding what they shouldn't even have to ask for. When a hospital is paying up to $6 an hour less, they should get their wages up to speed because nurses deserve to be compensated well and fairly for what they do. That's a no-brainer. That's a freaking no-brainer. So it's just sad to see. I mean, it's just sad to see that. And again, we cover strikes a lot on this show, and it always has the same theme where it's just like they shouldn't even have to ask for this stuff. They shouldn't even have to ask for fair treatment. They shouldn't even have to ask for, living wages. Especially nurses. You're going to screw over people that are saving lives? We're going to screw over people that are saving lives in the name of capitalism. USA. So hopefully those nurses get everything they're asking for and then some. And it's so disgusting that this is even happening. Let's move on to a little bit of good news. I feel like we freaking need it. And believe it or not, we got it. So you guys know that a digital rights group that I cover a lot on this show, and a digital rights group that I had the privilege of collaborating with on a campaign for net neutrality and a campaign against facial recognition, is Fight for the Future. Well, Fight for the Future was also on a campaign against Amazon's surveillance program at concerts. Amazon was going to do this thing where they could scan I believe it was your face, or no, I think it might have been your hand. We covered it on the show, but Amazon was going to basically scan your palm. Yeah, it was your palm, where they were going to scan your palm to go into concerts. And this was creepy. It was Orwellian. It was an overreach. And they were going to have these databases. And, well, here's what happened. So Fight for the Future launched a campaign. And check this out. Red Rocks abandons Amazon palm scanning tech after artist-led protest. This is from Rolling Stone. Tom Morello, Tom Morello was part of what Fight for the Future was doing. Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine. Tom Morello and Kathleen Hanna were among the signatories of a letter protesting the decision to implement palm scanning at the famed Colorado venue, which, by the way, I've never seen a concert at Red Rocks, and I've always wanted to. Look at that venue. You know, a comedian buddy of mine gets to perform there doing comedy. He got this gig opening up. So they do big movie nights at Red Rock, and he got this gig opening the movie nights. He goes up and he does 20 minutes before the movie. That sounds so cool. But anyway, let's get into this. Red Rocks, the famed amphitheater outside of Denver, will no longer use Amazon's palm scanning technology following an artist-led protest that included Tom Morello and Kathleen Hanna. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Tom Morello. Thank you, Fight for the Future. We won this one. Denver Arts and Venues, the agency that operates Red Rock, confirmed its decision to the advocacy group Fight for the Future. We haven't been in touch with Amazon in several months, and this isn't a planned activation at Red Rocks. I'm not sure what the future of this technology is, but at this point, it doesn't involve our venues. The protest against Amazon's One Palm recognition service sprung up last fall after the ticketing service Axis and its parent company AEG Worldwide announced that they would implement the service at Red Rocks, with plans to expand to other venues soon. While the tech was touted as a more convenient, secure, and hygienic alternative to concert entry, critics argued that palm scanners carried serious privacy and safety concerns for concert goers. Fight for the Future, along with 30 other advocacy groups, issued an open letter in response to the news that was signed by artists like Morello, Hanna, Mannequin Pussy, Speedy Ortiz, Jeff Rosenstock, Illuminati Hotties. That's an interesting band name. I'm not familiar with that band. I feel like I want to check them out, though. Illuminati Hotties. That's a band I got to check out. That is an interesting name. Anti-Flag, shout out to fellow Pittsburghers, Anti-Flag, and more. Which, by the way, I've been trying to get Justin from Anti-Flag on this show for well over a year. We were talking over Twitter. He wanted to come on the show, and then he just never got back to me. He's a busy guy, I know. But it's one of those things you want to draw that line between not coming off as a pest, but also kind of nudging and being like, hey, I really want you to do the show. If you don't want to do it, just type fuck off and send it. You won't hurt my feelings. I understand. I think that's the rule of thumb I would like here at Get Your News On with Ron. If you don't want to do my show, just say fuck off. It's okay. You could say it politely. Just be like, fuck off. I don't want to. Okay. You know, especially when it's like someone whose work I respect a lot. You know, if you don't want to do the show, I understand. But, you know, just kind of tell me that. Although, you know, that also hurts a little bit. You know, when Henry Rollins told me he didn't want to do my show, it hurt. Not going to lie. It freaking hurt. But I accept it. Anyway, so Evan Greer, the musician and director of Fight for the Future, Evan Greer, also friend of the show. She's been on the show a bunch of times, and her music's awesome too, by the way. Celebrated Red Rocks' decision in a Twitter thread, writing, "This is awesome because Red Rocks was one of the first major concert venues in the country to start experimenting with this type of biometric surveillance technology. Them dropping Amazon will send a strong message to other venues. Keep the pressure on." We got to take the wins where we could get them, and this is one of them. And a lot of you probably remember, we covered this on the show. We covered Amazon's palm surveillance and Red Rocks. We covered this in real time, and there was a call to action. So a lot of you signed the petition that led to this victory. I know I did. And, you know, last week we put up another petition that Fight for the Future is behind to stop. It was against the JCPA Act. That's an act that Amy Klobuchar is behind. Sorry, I had to go back in my memory bank because there's the Sesta Fosta thing, and then there's the JCPA thing. There's so many horrible tech policy pieces of legislation out there. I was like, what was the most recent one? JCPA, which would basically allow corporate media outlets to collude with Facebook and social media platforms to kind of dictate what links can be shown and if people need to pay to share a link, that kind of thing. That could be really bad. I think that goes without saying. So the JCPA petition we shared last week on the show. And, we see the fruits from our labor here. And shout out to Fight for the Future for winning this fight. This is freaking awesome. And shout out to you guys, too, for being part of it. Because, we shared that petition when it was in real time. So, all right. Got to take the victories where you can get them. And last but not least today, I have a kind of fun story that also kind of dwells in the music vein. This is a fun one. I thought it'd be fun to end on a fun note. Fun. Check this out. This is kind of cool. This also goes into music. And shout out to Edwin for bringing this to my attention. Edwin, I don't know if you're watching right now, but shout out to you for bringing this to my attention. This is from Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton was nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And here's what she had to say. Dolly Parton. Dolly here. Even though I am extremely flattered and grateful to be nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I don't feel that I have earned that right. I really do not want votes to be split because of me, so I must respectfully bow out. I do hope that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame will understand and will be willing to consider me again if I'm ever worthy. This has, however, inspired me to put out a hopefully great rock and roll album at some point in the future, which I have always wanted to do. My husband is a total rock and roll freak and has always encouraged me to do one. I wish all of the nominees good luck and thank you again for the compliment. Rock on. That is so badass. That is so... Dolly Parton is one of those people where it's just... She just seems like just a genuinely decent human being. Like I don't know many people that have a bad thing to say about Dolly Parton. Unless there's something I'm missing. But, she's always been a good humanitarian. Throughout the pandemic, she took care of everyone at Dolly World really well. She just seems like a genuinely decent human being. Like it's just, she's one of those people where it's just like, she puts a smile on most people's face, and I, even though, interestingly enough, I will say, I actually disagree with her assessment here. I think she is 100% deserving to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. What do you guys do? Let me know in the chat what y'all think. And I'll go through some chats here. What do you think? I think, look, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which there's plenty of things to be critical of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but it pretty much is just a pop music thing at this point. I mean, there's hip hop artists in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's country artists in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I think there should be. I mean, rock and roll is just a made up term anyway. That's why it's in Cleveland. For anyone that doesn't know, the reason that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in Cleveland is because of a famous radio show by a guy named Alan Freed. Now, Alan Freed had a rock and roll radio show. Why was it called a rock and roll radio show? Well, because he called it that so he could play black artists. This was at a time where we were a more racist society, although God knows we still got our problems there, but we were a more racist society, and rhythm and blues and rhythm and beat, which was what it was referred to, was considered like, oh, that's black music. We can't put that on the air. We can't put black music on the air. So Alan Freed said, okay, I'm going to call this rock and roll, and then it's going to be okay. So they'd be like, wait a second, is that R&B? And he'd be like, no, it's rock and roll. They'd be like, oh, okay, fine. And then he goes, up next, Chuck Berry. And people were like, Chuck Berry's freaking awesome. They realized the music freaking great because it was. So rock and roll is just kind of a made up term anyway. I love it. I freaking love rock and roll music. I've loved it my whole life, and I'll love it forever. But yeah, it's just a pop music Hall of Fame. So I think that she's totally deserving of it. But I think it's really badass. And by the way, I was curious if there was like another reason why she might have bailed out. But no, that is allegedly, that's just the reason why. She just feels like, I'm not a rock and roll artist, so I shouldn't be there. That's her jam. Now, if you were curious, the other folks that were nominated, Beck, I'm not really a Beck fan, Duran, Eminem. So Eminem, I mean, that's a hip hop guy. He's not bowing out, and he shouldn't. So I think Dolly Parton, I think it's so badass that she did it. I think it's just badass that she's like, yeah, I don't need this accolade, and I feel like I don't deserve it. So thanks, but no thanks. I mean, that's just like, how can you not be like, that's pretty freaking cool? But anyway, the other people, if you were curious, Beck, Duran, Eminem, Lionel Richie, Carly Simon, A Tribe Called Quest, and then previous nominees as of recent: Pat Benatar, Kate Bush, Devo, Eurythmics, Judas Priest, Fela Kuti, MC5, which is freaking badass, New York Dolls, also badass, Rage Against the Machine, and Dionne Warwick. Are also being considered again in 2022. And, shout out again to Tom Morello. Tom Morello was in the last story because Tom Morello helped out with this victory in getting the Amazon surveillance out of Red Rocks, which is pretty cool. And Bill points out it's actually totally rock and roll that she shunned the accolades. Isn't it, though? That's so badass. She's just like, yeah, no, thank you. And she was so polite the way she did it. Like, so just polite the way she did it. Like, maybe I'll make a great rock and roll record. And you know what? I can't wait to hear a rock and roll record. I'm so stoked to hear it. And there was that documentary about her recently that came out. And it was very enjoyable. I want to say it's on HBO, I think. Don't quote me on that. But there was a documentary that came out about her recently, and it was very enjoyable. Yeah, Dolly Parton. I mean, come on. How can you not like Dolly Parton? Yeah, she's one of those people. It's just you could tell. I mean, it just seems, and I've never met her in person, but it just seems like she genuinely just wants to do good. Like she genuinely like she's just trying to do good. And I think at the end of the day, that's all any of us can ask for. That's all. And honestly, I hope that's what people say about me. You know what I mean? Like I hope that people that doesn't mean you have to agree with me 100% of the time. But I'd like to think that people are like, yeah, Rob Lacode, maybe I don't agree with every strategy he has. Maybe I don't agree with every assessment he has. But that guy is just trying to do good. He wants to see the world be a better place. And he's trying to do good. I think that at the end of the day, that's all any of us can ask for. And that's why me personally, to kind of get a little broader here, that's why I'm not one of these people who will just, cancel somebody who I have strategic disagreements with. I'm not one of these people who, when I see people who are trying to do good, when I see people who are taking up causes and are just trying to, make a positive dent in things, even if I don't agree with every single take they have, I still find value in that. I mean, I still find value in, hey, I don't agree with every single take this person has politically, but they're the boots on the ground telling me this story, and it's insanely important, and I have nothing but respect for what they do. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get too far off on other topics here, but you get my point, that it's just like at the end of the day, all we can really ask for is just, hey, this person's trying to do good. They're trying to leave the world a little bit better than how they found it. And that's a good thing. That doesn't mean we can't disagree. That doesn't mean we can't, fight for what we believe to be right. But, so shout out to Dolly Parton. That's pretty cool. Last year, she refused the honor of having a statue of her in the Tennessee state capitol. I heard about that, Jody. Jody commented that. I heard about that, but I don't remember the details on that. I heard about that vaguely. It's kind of foggy in my memory, but I did hear that, yeah, she didn't want, which by the way is also badass. Be like, hey, we want to have a statue of you. No, thanks. You don't need a statue of me. That's pretty badass. So, it again, I can't speak to every single view Dolly Parton has. I just straight up don't know. So, you don't need to email me later and be like, you might disagree with Dolly on da-da-da. Like, I don't even know. I don't even know what her political views are, to tell you the truth. I don't really care all that much. So, you know what I mean? I just, again, she has demonstrated through actions that she just seems like a genuinely decent person. And I think that's really great. And I think the fact that people of her wealth, if more people of her wealth have done some of the positive things she has done, I think this country especially would be a better place. It'd be a better place. And I'm not saying that Dolly Parton is without her faults. We all have our faults, no matter who we are. But she has done a lot of good with her wealth, more than I think a lot of people have. And I think that's pretty cool. So, little fun story to end the show. And again, just to summarize the headline show of the week, shout out to Fight for the Future for the victory. Little bit of good news. And the Assange case continues. And hopefully, that they win the appeals and he does not get extradited. And we just got to keep on. We got to just we can't let this story die. And free Assange, and also solidarity to the nurses out in Western Pennsylvania. Stay warm, and hopefully you guys get everything you are asking for and then some. So solidarity with the nurses, free Assange. Shout out to Fight for the Future on the victory, and Dolly Parton, still a badass. That's the headline show for the week. Guys, thank you so much for being here. If you want to support this show at a sustainability end, patreon.com/Ron Placone. For Give What You Can, Love It. You get all kinds of cool perks. You get, I have stand-up clips not available anywhere else. You can get those in their entirety. You can download my first album. It's just available for download. You can just download it. I do Zoom shows for patrons. I do a patron stream where the replay is only available on Patreon and Rockfin Premium. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. You can get all that. Oh, and I'll make you a theme song. That's a really fun perk. You can get all that for as low as $1 a month. Guys, my goal is to get to 300 patrons. I have a lot of things on my plate this year. I am trying to launch another podcast series. I am making a movie. I am making a mini pilot. I cannot do any of this without your support. My goal is to get to 300 patrons by the summer. So if you got an extra $1 a month, it goes a long way. I know some of you are like, $1 a month, Ron, does that really do anything? Yes, it does, because I want to build a community. That's my goal. And I want to get to 300. So please, patreon.com/Ron Placone. If you got an extra $1 a month that you won't miss, please consider it. You get all kinds of cool stuff for $1 a month. Tour dates, I got them. April, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Burlington, Vermont, Portland, Maine, Boston, Massachusetts, and New York City, baby. Chris Moen's going to be opening all those shows. Lauren Ashcraft will be on the shows in Pittsburgh and New York. And Jill Stein's going to join me for a song in Boston. Get your tickets. Don't wait. RonPlacone.com. Grab those tickets. Do not wait. Grab them now. You guys know I'm going to be part of the Iceland Fringe Festival, the Reykjavik Fringe Festival in Iceland. That's happening in June. I don't know all the details yet. I don't know when my shows are going to be. As soon as I know more details, I'll be announcing them. But for now, I will be part of the Reykjavik Fringe Festival in June/early July in Reykjavik, Iceland. And I can't wait to, any Iceland folks, can't wait to see you there. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. This has been the headlines show for the week. We're not going to be on our regular time. Usually we do this on Thursdays. There will be no stream on Thursday this week because it is my wife's birthday. That's why we're coming at you today instead. So stay safe throughout the week. And you know the drill. Lucy, she says meow. I say peace, love, general strike, solidarity with the nurses, and free Assange now. Peace.